Ever since assuming leadership of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré has been balancing a tightrope. There have been ongoing threats to his authority, including backroom betrayals, covert schemes, and assassination attempts. He has been fighting hard against militants in an effort to stabilize the nation at the same time. But armed rebels aren't the only enemy he faces. His own boundaries include unspoken adversaries. Traoré has spent months searching for informants and spies, clandestine agents supported by strong Western countries that seek to overthrow Burkina Faso's government and depose him. Here's the issue though. These traitors are unarmed and without uniforms. They are extremely difficult to monitor since they blend in with society and operate in silence. Traoré's genius enters the picture. He followed the money instead of spirits. He put together a group of financial specialists to thoroughly examine the bank accounts of former public servants. They discovered something startling. Some people, massive deposits had been made into the accounts of several of them, who had previously held high positions as generals and ministers. And the sources, the sums were too great to overlook, doubtful at best. At last, the truth was known. Over 113 people had been clandestinely attempting to undermine the stability of Burkina Faso. Their bank accounts were now totally frozen when their network was made public. However, that is only the start. What will Traoré do with those he has discovered? And what will happen next? Burkina Faso has always been first for Ibrahim Traoré, frequently putting all on the line to protect the nation. However, he has recently reached a crucial insight. It's not simply about him to survive. The vision he is fighting for will also be lost if he falls. This has already been demonstrated by history. With strong foreign interests pulling the strings, the country's revolutionary leader, Thomas Sankara, was deceived and killed by his own inner circle. Traoré will not allow history to happen again. That is why a significant event occurred on November 19, 2024. Dr. Abubakar Nakanabo, the Minister of Economy of Burkina Faso, issued an executive order that shocked the nation with its shocking news. The edict specifically targeted anyone suspected of providing financial support to militants, the same forces that have been responsible for Traoré's constant attacks and assassination attempts. The final objective: to sow disarray, undermine the administration, and open the door for external forces to take over. The military-backed government, led by Traoré, acted quickly, freezing the assets of 2 organizations and 113 people, severing their financial lifelines. The revelation of the names on that list, however, was the true shock. A betrayal that was strikingly similar to what Sankara experienced. Trusted insiders working covertly with foreign interests. Among them was Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, a name that was especially explosive. Damiba overthrew the chosen president of Burkina Faso and took power in early 2022. However, Traoré overthrew him in September of that year, sending him into exile in Togo. Damiba is no longer merely observing from the sidelines, even in exile. He has been actively involved in schemes to destabilize Burkina Faso, including a recently revealed attempt to kill Traoré, the government claims. According to authorities, Damiba has been giving up private information to insurgent organizations and foreign intelligence services in an effort to weaken Traoré's administration. As the evidence mounts, Burkina Faso is now negotiating Damiba's extradition with Togo. Will he, however, be turned over to face justice? That is still an open question. The most recent crackdown by the Burkinabe administration has shocked the nation. Several well-known individuals have been identified in a broad decree as major participants in a covert plot to overthrow Captain Ibrahim Traoré's leadership. These are former government officials, not simply regular opposition members. Prominent media personalities and military officers are charged with planning a network of destabilization initiatives. One of the most prominent individuals on the list is General Gibril Bassol, a seasoned political figure who was once the foreign minister of Burkina Faso. He has long been a prominent person due to his influence in both military and diplomatic circles. But his suspected involvement in anti-government operations has recently brought him into the public eye for all the wrong reasons. Another name that is drawing attention is Alpha Barry, a former journalist who is now a politician with extensive media contacts. Authorities believe his influence has been utilized to quietly sway public opinion against the current administration by disseminating tales that sow discord and division. Ahmed Kinda, a former commander of special forces who is known for his strategic military planning, comes next. He is now charged with utilizing his knowledge to plan clandestine actions meant to erode Traoré's authority. Disbanded military officers like Leith Didier Bamouni are with him, and Romeo Awar, who allegedly had direct involvement in anti-government plots. But it's not only about people in this crackdown. The executive order also names two significant insurgent factions. Due to a series of horrific attacks that have terminated over 26,000 people since 2015, these groups have been at the heart of Burkina Faso's security dilemma for almost 10 years. Surprisingly, almost 13,500 of those deaths, more than half, have happened since Traoré took office in September 2022. In addition to the death toll, the insurgency has resulted in a catastrophic humanitarian situation. Critical infrastructure has been left in ruins, entire villages have been erased from the map, and over 2 million people have been displaced. Due in significant part to the constant influx of funding from their supporters, these organizations have been able to continue operating unchecked in spite of the destruction. The goal of Traoré's administration is to shut down these financial channels. Authorities are severing the very lifeblood that sustains these destabilization operations by freezing the assets of 113 people and several organizations. These networks will find it difficult to operate without funding, which will make them much more susceptible to direct military attack, the next stage of the government's strategy. According to reports, Burkina-based special forces would be used in strategic clandestine operations to totally destroy these groups after their finances are severely damaged. This action denotes a change from a defensive stance to an aggressive approach meant to disrupt insurgent activities at their most vulnerable moments. Simultaneously, there is increasing conjecture regarding the fate of the enormous quantities of money discovered throughout these inquiries. According to reports, the accused people's frozen bank accounts are filled with vast sums of money that were allegedly transferred in by foreign sponsors in return for their allegiance. This money could be used to bolster Burkina Faso's military if it were reallocated, delivering long overdue supplies to soldiers who have been ill-equipped for a long time. The Burkinabe army has been severely short-staffed for years. Basic supplies were scarce for soldiers, and people living in baffle areas were so poor that some of them had to eat leaves to stay alive. Traoré has been outspoken in his criticism of the previous government, claiming that the country's declining security is the result of its inability to put national defense first. Former leaders ignored the problems of their people, but his administration is now acting decisively to change that. A travel prohibition for all 113 of the people listed in the decree is another significant step in the crackdown, in addition to financial penalties. This restriction keeps them inside the law's grasp by preventing them from leaving the nation while investigations are ongoing. However, there are still major obstacles in the way of these bold actions. The fate of Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba is among the most significant mysteries. The previous leader is alleged to have been the driving force behind continuous attempts to destabilize the country. Although Burkina Faso is currently negotiating his extradition with Togo, it is unclear if these discussions will result in his return. Powerful individuals in African politics frequently avoid justice by insulating themselves from responsibility through influence and international ties. However, the Traoré administration seems committed to reversing that trend. There's more to this than a simple political purge. Destroying deeply ingrained networks of corruption, espionage, and external manipulation is a comprehensive endeavor. And there is still one unanswered question at the center of it all. Before it's too late, will Ibrahim Traoré be able to eliminate the greatest danger to his authority? Burkina Faso has discovered a network of treachery that extends beyond its boundaries. National Security Minister Mahamadou Sana claims that what appeared to be a lone coup attempt was, in fact, a meticulously planned conspiracy, including former leaders, military officers, and even civilians. However, it doesn't end there. Allegedly engaged were influential members of the nation's political and economic spheres, as well as foreign intelligence services. According to intelligence reports, this scheme's masterminds were not limited to Burkina Faso. Some of them coordinated their operations from a safe distance while working from neighboring nations including Ghana, Nigeria, and Côte d'Ivoire. Their objective: to remove Captain Ibrahim Traoré from office and destroy his government. At the heart of it all is Paul Henri Sandaogo Damiba, a name that many believed had vanished from Burkina Faso politics. This complex scheme is now being attributed to the former military ruler, who was deposed in 2022 and has been living in exile in Togo ever since. Previously perceived as having discreetly moved aside, he is now thought to be the one behind the scenes. According to authorities, Damiba wasn't acting alone. He allegedly formed a coalition with former lawmakers, journalists, and ministers, utilizing their contacts to disseminate propaganda, sway public opinion, and obtain funding from domestic and foreign sources. However, the apparent collaboration with deadly insurgency groups is what escalates the risk of this situation. According to reports, these terrorist groups, famous for their ruthless assaults throughout the Sahel, were enlisted in the scheme and provided with the information and tools necessary to carry out lethal operations. Their function was obvious: to incite widespread panic, intensify the situation, target civilians, and strike important government locations. The conspirators had mapped out a number of prominent targets, according to authorities. These included a military facility near Mangodara, Ouagadougou Airport, a vital drone base, and the presidential palace. The plan was straightforward yet disastrous: strike aggressively, instill terror, and erode trust in Traoré's administration. However, military activity was not the only aspect of the plot. A sophisticated media plan aimed at influencing public opinion was discovered by investigators. In order to support calls for Traoré's dismissal, the aim was to use the increase in rebel violence as evidence of his incapacity to lead. The conspirators thought they could turn the populace against their leader and create the conditions for a change in power if there was enough unrest and fear. This operation's magnitude and brutality demonstrated the lengths some people will go to in order to regain control. Politics wasn't the only factor. It was about power, influence, and a readiness to give up lives in order to forward a covered goal. The scope of this conspiracy has been further illuminated by recent arrests in Niger. While being questioned, people who were detained disclosed startling information regarding the plot's long-term goals, financing, and coordination. A last-minute coup attempt was not what this was. It took months to prepare, with every action well thought out to guarantee maximum effect. The Burkinabe administration has responded by launching a vigorous counter-operation aimed at destroying the last remnants of the plot. In addition to asking the relatives of those involved to come forward with information, authorities have encouraged everyone to exercise caution. Traoré has clarified one issue though. Preventing a coup is not the only goal here. It's a component of a much bigger endeavor to bring stability back, destroy corruption, and bring all of the conspirators to justice. You must really enjoy this video if you are still viewing it. Why not press the like button for a moment? Have you taken that action? Let's go on. Rumors of foreign meddling in Burkina Faso's security situation have been written off as conjecture for months. However, currently, a far more sinister picture is emerging. one that points to a concerted attempt to undermine the nation both domestically and internationally. France has been accused by both Mali and Burkina Faso of encouraging insurgencies in the region, but fresh evidence suggests a more deliberate strategy. According to news sources, the plan was to replace Captain Ibrahim Traoré with a person more supportive of foreign interests rather than merely causing disruption. The plan was straightforward yet disastrous. Insurgent organizations would receive resources, be given more confidence, and be urged to intensify their attacks. The objective? To overthrow Burkina Faso's government and make Traoré seem unable to bring the country back to normal. The Burkinabe people would be in dire need of stability when things got out of hand. Then a familiar face would reappear at the exact moment. Paul-Henri Sandaogo Damiba, former military leader Damiba, who was deposed in 2022, would be presented as the nation's savior, intervening to save Burkina Faso from the very chaos his supporters had created. The same forces who fueled the rebellion would abruptly depart, and he would retake power with international assistance, giving the impression that only Damiba could bring about peace. Traoré is aware of how serious this issue is. He is aware that Burkina Faso will continue to be trapped in a vicious circle if this plot is let to proceed, one in which its people are left to the mercy of political games they never chose to play, and its leadership is handpicked by outside forces. Traoré is aware of how serious this issue is. He is aware that Burkina Faso will continue to be trapped in a vicious circle if this plot is let to proceed, one in which its people are left to the mercy of political games they never consented to play, and its leadership is personally chosen by outside forces. In order to end this cycle, two important goals are in Traoré's sights. He must first confront the insurgent menace directly, targeting the same groups that have been employed as pawns in this geopolitical chess game. His government is stepping up military actions, restoring stability, safeguarding communities, and making it abundantly evident that Burkina Faso will not be ruled by terror are more important goals than merely eliminating armed groups. Second, Traoré is aware that there is a chance of another coup, as long as Damiba is free. The goal of extraditing him from Togo is to stop a major contributor to this destabilization attempt, not only to bring him to justice. Damiba might carry on operating covertly and waiting for another chance to attack if he is not stopped. This playbook has already been used in Burkina Faso. The nation's revolutionary leader, Thomas Sankara, was terminated in a coup in 1987 by his erstwhile ally, Blaise Compaoré. During the 27 years that Compaoré ruled, Burkina Faso's economy stagnated, its reliance on outside forces increased, and its citizens suffered. Justice appeared to be within grasp when Compaoré was eventually ousted from office. However, he was protected from extradition in 2016, when Alassane Ouattara, the president of Ivory Coast, awarded him Ivorian citizenship. He still lives freely in exile despite having been later condemned to life in jail in absentia for his involvement in Sankara's death. Traoré doesn't want history to happen again. Damiba won't be allowed to avoid responsibility like Compaoré did. The long-standing practice of impunity that has enabled political officials to elude prosecution is directly challenged by his extradition. Those who caused Burkina Faso to become unstable will be held accountable this time. Furthermore, the Burkinabe administration is now going beyond. A contentious discussion has been triggered by the current spike in traitorous activities. Should offences pertaining to national security once again carry the death penalty? 2018 saw the abolition of the death penalty in Burkina Faso, but the military regime is suddenly changing its mind, claiming that serious crimes call for serious punishments. The significant stakes involved are reflected in the judgment. The repercussions would have been catastrophic if the coup plot had been overlooked. The plotters had more in mind than a simple political ploy. To further their goals, they were prepared to resort to guerrilla violence, assaults on civilians, and media manipulation. However, Another question arises now that the narrative has been revealed. What will become of those who are apprehended? The outcome of this case could establish a precedent for Burkina Faso's political future, because the government is committed to thwarting any such attempts at instability. And the fate of Paul-Henri Damiba and his network of conspirators now lies with the Burkinabe legal system. Even the conspirators were unaware of the turning point that the aftermath of the failed coup had brought about for Burkina Faso. Their activities have strengthened President Ibrahim Traoré's hold on power rather than overthrowing the government. What was supposed to be a well-thought-out attempt to remove him has gone horribly wrong, revealing the very individuals who had been quietly trying to undermine the country. Currently, Burkina Faso is experiencing the opposite of a weaker government. A leader who is inspired by his opponent's failures and is committed to enacting comprehensive reforms that would eliminate any possibility of future treachery. People who used to work covertly because they thought they were untouchable are now rushing to save themselves. The repercussions for Paul-Henri Damiba could scarcely be more dire. Once a military leader who used force to grab power, he is now charged with planning to terminate the man who took his place. It's not simply a legal battle that will bring him down. It serves as a reminder of how swiftly the balance of power may shift. Once linked to leadership, Damiba's name is now inextricably linked to betrayal and conspiracy. However, there's another urgent issue. Will he be protected by Togo? African presidents who have been charged with major crimes have previously sought safety in nearby nations. For instance, Blaise Compaoré, who was charged with planning Thomas Sankara's murder, was awarded Ivorian citizenship. He was protected from extradition by that action, which allowed him to elude justice for many years. Could Damiba be a replay of history? Burkina Faso's success in obtaining his extradition will send a strong statement throughout the continent, as well as within the nation. It would demonstrate that no leader, no matter how strong, can avoid responsibility indefinitely. The legal system is getting ready to present a case that will serve as a warning to anyone who would dare to sell out the nation for foreign interests or personal benefit. However, Damiba is not alone in being judged. The 113 other people who were taken into custody will likewise go through a lengthy legal process. The administration has stated unequivocally that individuals found guilty of treason or sedition will be held accountable, and that the evidence will be carefully examined. Law number 025-2018N, which created Burkina Faso's penal code, specifies harsh penalties for offences that endanger national security. The legislation clearly outlines offences like treason, espionage, and attempts to subvert the government, even though it does not use the term sedition specifically. These offences have traditionally resulted in lengthy prison terms. But a contentious topic is currently being considered. The 2018 repeal of the death penalty is being re-examined. Some government officials feel that Burkina Faso requires more robust deterrence against future betrayals because of the scope of this conspiracy and its possible repercussions. The argument now centers on setting an example for the guilty rather than merely punishing them. Because the true question is still if there are still traitors in the system. If so, what message ought to be conveyed to make sure that no one is brave enough to follow in their footsteps? A reckoning is coming for Burkina Faso. The administration is currently facing one of the most important questions in its history after the recent coup plan was revealed and more than 100 conspirators were apprehended. How should the nation's traitors be dealt with? Burkina Faso formally abolished the death sentence from its legal system in 2018, after taking a strong stand against it for many years. However, recent occurrences have rekindled the discussion. Some contend that the most severe penalties are necessary for offences as serious as conspiring to topple the government and collaborating with foreign powers to cause instability in the country. Others think that rather than using executions, the legal system should set an example by enforcing justice through long-term incarceration. President Ibrahim Traoré is at the center of this discussion. He has previously stated unequivocally that he will not put up with internal challenges that jeopardize the stability of Burkina Faso. Many people think he is willing to reinstate the death penalty in order to serve as a deterrence to those who believe they can plot against the country and get away with it. The fate of the 113 people detained in relation to the plot, including intelligence agents, military commanders, and previous officials, is yet unknown. They were all involved in a plot that might have caused anarchy in the country. Is their penalty harsh enough to make a statement? Or ought Burkina Faso to take a different approach, making sure that justice is done without going too far? The more significant question is if there are any more covert plots, if this one was so pervasive. Are there more people in positions of authority who are just waiting for the appropriate opportunity to attack? If so, the manner in which these conspirators are handled could decide whether traitors in the future are afraid or emboldened to act. Do you find Traoré's actions as nation enjoyable? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. Subscribe for more.